Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. Glad you are here as always. I'm actually really excited this week. I know I say every week that I'm excited, and I am, but I'm really excited this week because I've been wanting to have somebody on the podcast for quite some time now to talk about the carnivore diet. If this isn't something that you've heard about, it's going to be very interesting to you, I guarantee. It's definitely a different way of approaching eating than probably anybody's ever told you about before. Definitely a doctor has not told you about before. And I've seen it work with some clients of mine. I've seen it work with some of my colleagues very well when nothing else is working. So today on the podcast, we have Ede Fox, who is a health coach and founder of the Black Carnivore community. Fox lost 80 pounds, regained her health on a carnivore diet, and then turned in to help others find the same success. She runs a carnivore coaching community, a growing Facebook community, hosts a podcast, and a weekly live stream on YouTube. If you're interested in a strong, supportive community of carnivores, you'll want to follow her on her YouTube and Instagram, which is at Black Carnivore, to stay on top of all that she is doing. You can also find her at her website, blackcarnivore.com/apply now. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yes. So as I mentioned, to you before and mentioned here at the top of the podcast, that this is something that I just find fascinating, the carnivore diet. And I've sort of tipped my way into it a little bit at different moments and then kind of pulled back. So I'm really curious to hear, for those that don't know what carnivore is, I want you to definitely explain that. And then to hear your story of how you got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a wonderful way of eating and, super easy to do. I know sometimes people feel a little bit hesitant. It feels kind of complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think a lot of the people that we get trying it initially are, people who've sort of given up on the complexities of the keto diet and tracking macros and all of that, and who just want to give up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I think a carnivore diet is, just as it says, eating only from the animal kingdom. Now, scientists sort of define a hypercarnivore as any animal that eats 70% or more of its daily calories from animal sources. So by that definition, basically anybody who's following, very clean keto is a carnivore.
Gotcha.
All the way up to someone like me who's really only eating from the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
So the way I talk about it in my community is you can do strict, moderate, or relaxed carnivore. So strict carnivore would be, you're really only eating from the animal kingdom, no coffee, no spices, nothing like that. You're just eating eggs, any kind of dairy, any kind of cow, any kind of fish, any kind of,
and that's hardcore when you pull coffee out for people, right? That's a tough one.
It can be. Right. Although I go on and off coffee. So I'm now on day 3 of no coffee. There are definite benefits to doing no coffee. So 100%. If that's something you're thinking about, don't hesitate to give it a try.
Yeah.
And then moderate carnivore would include the coffee, would include herbs and spices, maybe avocado, olives. These are low sugar fruits. And, and stuff like that. And then if you are able to tolerate more, you might do relaxed carnivore on the weekends, or I don't know, maybe more often than that. So that would be people who also include artificial sweeteners and make carnivore desserts or add some to their coffee, or choose to have, if they're out at a restaurant and a vegetable side comes, they choose to have it, or they have it occasionally. Mm-hmm. So that category, you often hear people sort of talking about ketovore. So, that would kind of be in that category. So, I think it's, I want it to be easy and for people not to feel overly, it's too complicated. Right. There is a way for you to fit carnivore into your life. And it's important to remember, you're not trying to get a diet, force your life into a diet. You're trying to get the life to fit into, get the diet to fit into your life.
Right.
This is something that you want to do that that's sustainable, that you want to do long term. So you don't want to do something that's like, super challenging or just doesn't fit for you.
Right.
And then you also have to think about your goals. I mean, if you're trying to, deal with acute disease, or, you've got cancer, then yeah, you're going to need to be super strict. But, but if you only have a few pounds to lose, or, you're trying to deal with your autoimmune disease, maybe you can be a little bit more loose. It really kind of depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to do, and what you're willing to tolerate. And I found, for me, when I went, we're going to get into that later, but when I went carnivore and then also took out dairy, my asthma went away.
Yeah.
And that was like a game changer for me.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I mean, initially it was like, oh my God, no cheese, no
I know,
food,
cheese and coffee are the two biggest things people do not want to take out of their diet.
Right. But then it was like, oh, I can breathe. I don't need my
Yeah.
inhaler. I mean, I haven't used my inhaler in years.
Right.
I still
That's
get
amazing.
it filled just so for emergencies. But
Right.
like, so for me, like, the payoff for being very strict is very high.
Yeah.
But for someone else who maybe doesn't have as, acute stuff, like maybe they're willing to tolerate feeling 85% instead of feeling 99%. And in order to have, that thing, whatever it might be.
It's kind of meeting people where they're at.
Yeah. And so that's the way I, encourage you to look at carnivore, and then, just kind of ease into it and kind of figure out from there, like how you want to do it, what you want it to look like. The only thing I would say is I do see a lot of people coming from keto and who want to do, who say they don't eat beef or pork. And so they want to do it eating chicken and fish. And that is, that I don't see that working. For most part, people are, hungry and tired, and you really need to eat ruminant animals of some kind. So it's fine if you don't eat beef, but then you need to eat lamb, or you need to eat goat or bison or elk, or,
because they're packed with nutrients. I mean, that's the reality, right? I think a lot of people, there's been such a negative, connotation or negative, headlines, I'd say, like studies, all this kind of stuff is trying to say that meat is bad, right? And we really are missing out on, historically, like it's so nutrient dense, and so often it's just people maybe can't digest it very well. There's, different things going on. And so I can see, if you go fully carnivore, like just eating the white meats isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, definitely.
So how did you find your way into carnivore?
Well, I had been following keto. I started on a keto diet in 2015, and I went on to lose 80 pounds.
And did you do it originally for weight loss purposes, or other? Okay.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Well, in the beginning, I mean, when I first started, I was in terrible physical shape. I had plantar fasciitis. My knees were killing me. Like I was going down this, I live in a third floor walk up, and I used to take the subway and all that stuff all the time. And I used to have to go down the stairs backwards because my knees just hurt so much.
Wow.
And and I was, and I'd wake up in the morning and it would take me like 5 minutes to kind of warm up my body to be able to get up and get out of bed. And I was just like, man, is this it? Like,
right. You're like, it's only going to go down from hill from here. Right. Yeah.
And I finally just got to the point where I was like, I think I was 44, and I said, this is it. Like, if this is middle age, fine, but I want to start higher on the hill. And so I, made it a decision that I was going to do everything I could to, to be in the best shape possible for, a middle-aged Black woman. That was my goal. And, I tried a couple of different diets, but then finally, kind of landed on keto, and like, that was it. Like that, that solved the hunger problem, the energy problem. Suddenly, I mean, definitely the first 6 weeks for me was a nightmare. Did
you go through the keto flu or whatever they call it?
Well, I think that I'm addicted to sugar. So for
Right.
me, it was withdrawals.
Yeah. Gotcha.
The keto
Mhm.
flu is usually is really about electrolytes. And,
Mm.
and I had a little bit of that too, but for me, the bigger part was really coming off that sugar.
Mhm.
And, and for this is of course more of interest to women, but I think that I had systemic yeast. So I was constantly dealing with yeast infections,
Yeah.
but, on keto that improved, but when I went carnivore, it just stopped. And I have
100%.
not
Yeah.
had one since. Yeah. So for me, I think like I just was really my gut, my
Yeah.
gut biome was like built for sugar.
Yeah.
And so
Those
for
bad
me,
guys
that
are like,
was,
give it to me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's too also why keto was effective. Like if I had been starting keto now when there are all these different keto products, like I don't think I ever would have gotten into ketosis. I would have been totally
Mhm.
confused. But back
Mhm.
then in 2015, that we weren't even using the word keto. So
Right.
there wasn't a lot of products. It was like buy some meat, buy some vegetables,
Yeah.
buy some
Eat real
blueberries, and
food.
that was kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I started. But even with that, I think that it still kept alive a lot of my craving. It
Yeah.
kept alive, my cravings and
Yeah.
some of my insulin resistance and the, whatever the biome part that, just loves sugar.
Yeah.
So when I actually went carnivore, like that's really where the dramatic change came in terms of, my health improvements, my energy improvements, and my mental health and my mental ability to be focused, completely get rid of all the brain fog,
Right.
and and all the cravings and all of that. So that was, there really was for me a very, very stark difference between keto and carnivore. And then finally, I also have a lot of autoimmune disease, so I have asthma, eczema, and allergies. And, this has been a problem, throughout my life.
Mhm.
I wasn't actually diagnosed until asthma until very late, but they diagnosed me with allergy induced asthma. So basically I get so inflamed that it causes my inability to breathe.
Wow.
So, when I was following keto, I was doing well in terms of losing weight, but my breathing was getting worse and worse. And so
Mm.
by the end, I ended up I think it was in January of 2018, I ended up in urgent care twice that month because I just couldn't breathe.
Wow.
And so, I had to have a nebulizer. They gave me prednisone, Advair, and like the inhalers, the long acting ones, as well as the short acting ones. And
Bunch
they
of
just kind of
steroids.
threw,
Yeah.
they threw
Yeah.
everything at me.
Mhm.
And so, then it became clear, like, okay, there's really a big problem here. And so, like I said, once I took out that dairy and I went carnivore, like it was a dramatic difference. And, I've never really looked back since then. So
So
that's how I got to carnivore. That's
okay,
a long
no,
story.
that's great. No, that was great because I'm always fascinated, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I think probably some of the people listening are like, oh, it's extreme to be carnivore, right? So
Mhm.
it's really important, I think, for people to understand the progression. And what I've seen for people that have used carnivore, it's usually they're in pretty bad shape on some level, whether autoimmunity, just their gut won't heal no matter what they do, etc. I do have to ask because my, general tiptoeing into carnivore, part of why it's been a little tougher for me is I lost half my colon in a surgery that went awry and led to more surgeries. And so, I mean, my microbiome is, I'm still rebuilding it and everything too. But I definitely, when I've stepped into carnivore, have gotten into what I've heard can happen in the beginning of carnivore, which is just like crazy loose stools for a while. Is that something that happened to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it can happen for a number of reasons. And so it took me some time to kind of figure out those reasons and
Mhm.
to adjust them. But I think also part of it is that you're just, you're building a whole new,
Microbiome.
microbiome.
Right. Right.
And, in that interim period, it's not happy.
It's like, what
It's
is
not
going
happy
on
with
here?
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you remember how long that transition was till things kind of firmed back up?
Well, I think it was longer than it needed to be for me because I was doing things. So I actually created a video called Common Problems, Common Solutions to go over, those specific things that I see people, the most common things that I see people doing wrong in the beginning that, sort of prolongs their discomfort. So for me, one, it was trying to eat too much protein in one sitting. So I think that our stomach acid is, very well able to deal with, with protein and with these kinds of foods. But, if you've come from the standard American diet where, you're eating a lot of carbs, whether it's in the form of vegetables or it's in the form of candy and cake, that actually reduces the acidity of your stomach. And so initially you might not have enough stomach acid to be able to digest, a pound or 2 pounds of beef. And so when people, see these pictures on Instagram of somebody sitting down to a 2-pound ribeye and they're like, all right, yes, I'm doing it. I'm there for you. It's like your stomach is just not ready for that.
Yeah. Your stomach's like, no.
Yeah. And it's not that you can't ever do it. It's just that you're not ready in the beginning. And then
it's like you can't go lift like 100 pounds the first time you go work out, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Work up to
exactly.
It,
yeah. And then the other problem too is a lot of people struggle with heartburn. And so the standard medication actually is designed to reduce the acidity in your stomach.
Right.
So, if you've ever been a person that, just took a lot of Tums, or if you, actually
PPIs,
right, you're gonna have that trouble. And what we're trying to do is make the stomach more acidic.
Right.
But it's funny, you can, until you get to the point where you can digest, what can happen is you can have a lot of heartburn, you can have like a bloated feeling, you can feel like there's a rock sitting in your stomach, and then you can have a lot of diarrhea. That's the common thing, so a lot of times people don't know what to do, or they take Tums, which makes it worse, or, they take various kinds of medications. So, really, I think the best solution is just eat smaller meals.
Right. Right.
Don't try to eat 2 pounds at once.
You're like, we're keeping it simple here.
Yeah. And then, beyond that, the other thing that people do is eating too much liquid fat. So, we've come from a low fat world. Everyone's talking about low fat. And so, our systems aren't really designed and ready to deal with a lot of fat, and certainly not a lot all at once, which is, again, the 2-pound ribeye.
Right.
So I tell people to don't drink the liquid fat. So when you're making, sometimes people make ground beef crumbles and they'll pour all of that into a bowl and there'll be a lot of fat in there. So it's almost like cereal.
Yeah.
But the liquid fat is fine to consume, but when it's in its liquid form, it just moves through your system really fast, and it's just going to cause diarrhea.
Right. Your gallbladder doesn't have time to like catch up and release all the bile. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just want to, eat solid fat. So that means, on a piece of steak, the fatty, cap that's on it, that's fine. But the liquid stuff that's rendered out in the pan, you don't want to have that, or save it for later, or save it just for cooking, but don't actually consume it. And over time, you'll be able to build up, and then you will be able to drink that bowl. Like I didn't used to be able to, but now I can. And, and it's fine, at least for my stomach. So that's something to consider. And I'm actually, so I, if people want to look at that video, that will help you kind of pinpoint, lots of things. There's also salt, making sure that you're consuming enough, because that's a big part of producing the stomach acid. So people will complain of either diarrhea or constipation, and the constipation is often not enough salt, because salt is very much a part of the process of forming like a normal stool. So
So do you sometimes recommend, or do people need some HCl in the beginning, assuming they don't have acid reflux, heartburn, that kind of thing, to support their system for a little while and then get into not needing it as much?
I mean, I would try like for 1 or 2 meals, like just bringing the rendered fat down and making the meals smaller. And if that helps, then, you don't really need to get into the HCL. But, if you're struggling or in discomfort, get the HCL. I mean, I kind of wished that I had done it, for a little bit, because I mean, there's no reason to be in that kind of discomfort.
Right.
So, yeah, so get it. And even if you do have heartburn, I mean, that is a reason to get it. Because that is one of the common signs that you're not digesting the protein properly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, what about probiotics? Is that something that you take when you're carnivore, or is that you don't feel like you need to?
I haven't. Over the years, I've gone on and off of trying to take probiotics. I haven't really noticed a difference for me. And I feel like it's such a challenge to find ones that are, live. Good quality, and I don't know, make it to your gut alive. So I just haven't had good luck with them on my own. And there was a time when I was trying to deal with the yeast with my gynecologist, who had suggested, a series of probiotics as well as diflucan. And, we tried this and it really didn't work. So I don't know. I mean, certainly a dietary change is going to have a much bigger impact. But I have heard of people with SIBO and with other kinds of stuff combining, carnivore with some probiotics and maybe even I've heard of people doing fecal transplants and having some success. So I mean,
it just it depends on where your
table.
Where your microbiome lands, I guess, when it comes down to it. So and this is, I dive into these things. I'm like, let's talk poop. Anyways, at this point, do you have kind of the like daily, once a day, twice a day bowel movement?
No, not daily.
Okay, it's less with carnivore. So what is kind of the average that you're looking for with carnivore?
I mean, I think everybody, sets their own rhythm. I mean, I certainly wouldn't expect more than once a day.
Okay.
That would make me think that there's something going awry. But otherwise, I just kind of judge by, if you feel like you need to go and can't, then there's a problem and there's something to look at.
Right.
But if you don't feel like you need to go and you aren't going, like, that's fine.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's such a, I know taking that fiber out, right, it's going to be a completely different ball game than, if you're eating all this fiber, you're going to be getting more stuff out more consistently. And so I've always wondered like how that works with the carnivore, because I know it sounds like for some people, they go not even necessarily daily on carnivore. That's the case?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a daily bowel movement person. But, I mean, I feel like in, the years prior, like I've always been a person that was trying to be health conscious and, eat my veggies and tried vegetarian and tried to include more fiber and took supplements. Whenever I took fiber supplements, it was disastrous. I mean, absolutely disastrous. But, but even still, like throughout my 20s and teens, I always had like stomach disruptions, a lot of, diarrhea or constipation or just, every kind of problem. And so, going to the bathroom was not like an easy experience. So I was kind of expecting on carnivore for, to have like, just to have problems or, something, but it was like immediately everything went silent. Like there's just no noise, no movement, no nothing, no discomfort. And I love how like after eating, my stomach still feels as flat as before eating. Like there's no distension. There's no bloating. There's none of that. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that your digestive system could just be silently doing its job.
And that's what the goal is, right? Is that we digest without having the gas and bloating that is so common in our culture, so
And so now like the whole process is just easy. I used to be like, you'd have magazines and books and stuff in the bathroom. Now it's like in and out and I'm done.
You're done. Yeah.
And it's easy.
You're like, my diet's easy and my pooping's easy. That's how we roll. I like it. So I do have to bring up oxalates, because personally, this is something I just learned 7 months ago when I did an oat test, that I had high oxalates, and that I actually have the genetic predisposition towards high oxalates of one of the genetic markers, which I found was fascinating, because I was vegan in my 20s. And as it goes a lot of times, right, the first year feels great. And then you just like plummet, right? But you just don't think it's the diet, right? It's everything but the diet, or I'm not being strict enough, or I'm not cleansing enough, and now I look back and I'm like, I mean, among many things, I just need a lot of protein personally, but, and meat protein, but also the fact that I, have probably dealt with high oxalates for the long haul, because it's a genetic disposition to it. So, what happens? I'm assuming you have some people come into your program that have the oxalate issue, right? And what happens with sort of the like bringing down of these vegetables, and then what they call oxalate dumping? I know sometimes that can be an issue for people. Do you see that that's something that people have to deal with?
Yeah, although I feel like it shows up in different ways for different people. And I had Sally Norton on my podcast, and it was really awesome to like dive into the conversation with her. And it kind of went in a different way than I was expecting. I was sort of expecting to have the standard conversation about what are oxalates and how you get it and blah, blah, and all of that. But we started talking about endometriosis, which is something that I have struggled with. And we, really dove deep in on the topic and its relationship to oxalates. And I realized in speaking to her that, oxalates present themselves as a problem in a lot of different ways. Right. And the classic ways that, you might be thinking about are not, I don't think they're what I experienced. So I started the carnivore diet, and then like a year later, maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 months later, I started hearing, people, Sally Norton, talk about oxalates. And I was just kind of like, well, like I've already been doing the carnivore diet. Like if I was dumping, I've dumped, I'm not going to backtrack now and like try to have more carbs to slow down dumping. So, I mean, whatever.
You're like, I'm past the point.
I'm already there.
Yeah.
So I kind of was like, well, I've done all of the things, that you can do to lower oxalates. So I kind of stopped listening, is the point.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any of like the skin stuff and, or, crystals coming out or
right.
vulva pain. So like, I just kind of stopped really listening to it. But then actually in talking to her, I realized that, these oxalates can come out all over the body in lots of different places. And that may in fact be, a significant part of the scar tissue that is endometriosis. And and that's a silent problem, so I wasn't having pain until all of a sudden, I had to have emergency surgery, almost died. And so, it's like this silent thing that's sort of building up. And, so, yeah. So, and a lot of the people that I work with, I mean, I don't know, this is sort of an interesting cultural thing, but I feel like a lot of the people, veganism and, doing a lot of juicing and stuff hasn't been super common in the Black community for, it's something that's becoming more common. And so the people that I work with typically, haven't come from a background of one where they're eating 4 and 5 bushels of
kale a day,
kale and spinach a day.
Yeah.
And so the I think that when you see people doing that, the oxalate damage tends to look a certain way
Right.
versus, when, you see somebody doing something different, it presents itself in a different way.
Yeah.
So the typical signs that people have of this oxalate dumping, I feel like I don't really see in the population I'm dealing with. I'm
Mm-hmm.
dealing with people who have 100 pounds to lose, they're trying to reverse diabetes, bring down high blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it is something that I look for and think about now.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, have started adding calcium supplements back into my diet, because that is one way that the oxalates are, drawn out of your body.
Yeah, absolutely. I started
Mhm.
on that right away. And I, have had to put a couple of my clients on low ox diets, and same thing, get that, that cal citrate in with your meal. It's going to help bind to it and get it out. And instead of that, I think, and I realize I didn't really explain oxalates to people that don't know what they are, but it's basically this compound that's in vegetables. And some people call it an anti-nutrient, and basically vegetables have these different anti-nutrients, quote unquote, in order to help protect them, right? Because they want to survive our digestive system and come out the other end and plant and continue to thrive, right? But I think a lot of times we think, oh, vegetables are so easily digested. And the reality is there are lots of these components. So, like fiber, we don't, break down. Like it comes out the other end. And so with the oxalates in particular, I think kidney stones are what's probably most people, if they've heard of oxalates, sort of understand that kidney stones come from that, because it's dumping into your kidneys and creating these stones. But it can show up. I mean, fibromyalgia, there's some studies I've read that, they're thinking that there's some connection with oxalates and fibromyalgia, because it's just dumping these crystals in your joints and causing this pain. So it's fascinating, I think, when you get into something like the carnivore diet, because it kind of tackles all these different areas without you necessarily even knowing about them, right? Because most
Yeah.
people don't necessarily know about oxalates unless they've
Yeah.
have a kidney issue, or kind of
Well,
happened
going
upon it.
carnivore, I think really helps crystallize,
Mhm.
if I may
But
use that pun,
yeah.
and clarify really how problematic vegetables can be, because
Right.
oxalates is one of
Right.
several of the anti-nutrients that cause a lot of problems for people. And
Mm-hmm.
we have focused more on, like, maybe the problems that gluten causes for people with celiac disease. And
Mm-hmm.
but there's also phytates and lectins and uh oh gosh, and others.
Yeah.
So,
There's several.
there's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
whole
Those are the
host of
big
them.
ones.
Yeah.
Those three are the big ones.
Yeah.
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 So, I think that carnivore's benefits, I mean, both come from being a ketogenic diet. So it
Yeah.
is important to me to be in ketosis, and I maintain that. But it's also about removing a lot of these plant compounds that, some people I think are maybe more sensitive to,
Yeah.
or maybe we're all, who knows. But
Yeah. Yeah.
removing those plant compounds has a dramatic difference that doesn't happen on a ketogenic diet.
Right, right. And, to sort of add to that point, like whether we're all sensitive to all these things, I think a lot of times people are like, why are our bodies not working in the way that they're designed to work? And, you have to think about the amount of stress that people are under these days, the amount of environmental toxins that are out there that are impacting our bodies and our ability to digest properly, for our liver to work, so there's, sometimes I think if we lived on an island where we were just like getting to be humans, then diet wouldn't matter so much, right? We could probably eat more of everything and be fine. But the reality is we live in a time that has a lot that's impacting our health. And so sometimes we really have to make this choice for you know, um, a stricter, if you want to call it, or just a different pathway than sort of what we've been told around our health and around our diet. So
Yeah. And I think if I had started out as a child, like not eating candy,
yeah, 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 yeah.
brownies,
Right.
I might be in a different place right
Yeah.
now. I might be able to tolerate more of these things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and living in the middle of a city that's filthy and all of that. So,
Etc. Yeah. Yeah. And the
mhm.
genetics that are passed down to us too. So how did you end up starting a community for Black carnivores?
Well, I was in it by myself and I wondered if there were any other Black people that were
Yeah.
doing this. It is a weird diet, I'm not going to lie.
People are like, what do you
Yeah.
do? What do you eat
Yeah.
all the time?
People get confused
Yeah.
and and not even really understand what the word carnivore means. So
Right.
people just sometimes people think that just means I eat meat,
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to see if other people were doing this. And the thing, I think that food is some people say to me, oh, what's the difference? Like, food is food. Like, why do you have to create this separatist community? But I don't think that food is food. I am also a former anthropologist, and I see, food is how we carry culture from one generation to the next. It's how we identify. It's how we communicate and connect with other people. It's how you build, a community, and how you build friendship and love and partnership with people. So food has a lot of meaning and power, and so you want to. So I think it's important to, be able to respect people's cultural, ideas about food or their relationship to food. And so that means, talking about, like, if you're from the Caribbean, how do you do Caribbean, food, keto or carnivore style? Or how do you do soul food, carnivore style? What do you do when, you go to,
a
to
friend's
a home
house or
for,
family? Yeah.
a home for a big family dinner and you're not eating the mac and cheese, like, that's a point of discussion for the whole family. So how are you going to respond?
Right.
And so providing that kind of support, I think, is really important. And then unfortunately, I think that the carnivore community has attracted a wide audience, but there's a factor or a sector of that audience that I think is very racist and very sexist, and
AKA
is
bro culture.
I'm not going to say all guys, but there is definitely some a fringe of it, a somewhat vocal fringe of it, who has a pretty big audience.
Yeah.
And so and I think that is off-putting. I mean, first of all, if you're trying to sell a weird diet to people, don't be weird. Yes, try to bring this out to people. Like, that's not appealing to your average population.
Right.
And I want it to be open and inclusive, so that Black people, people of color, or people regardless of their sexual or gender identity, feel comfortable in the space. Like, you want to build a community where that is not a problem for people, or they feel welcome. And I feel passionate about this because I think the carnivore diet can provide such healing for people. And when you look at at least the American population, we're like, obesity and just basic metabolic disease is just skyrocketing. So people are not getting well, and unless they want to be on medication for the rest of their lives and still decline, the only other option is to get on a ketogenic diet, or better yet, a carnivore diet, which provides even greater and more deeper healing for some people. So I want people to feel like there is a place. Like, if you are curious about this and you want some support, there is a place for you that is not going to be weird, threatening, like a place where you're suddenly going to be in discussion or argument about the president. Like, there's a place.
Right. Gotcha. So is it a lot of Black women that work with you, or is it pretty balanced, Black women and Black men and other people of color? What does that kind of break down?
Well, I would say for me, it's mostly Black women that I'm working with, but I think that's because, diet culture and coaching and all of that kind of stuff is just, something that women do more frequently than men. there's a lot of husbands that are part of the community.
Yeah, they get
So,
pulled in.
yeah. So for
They're like,
every
honey, you're
woman,
doing this with me. Yeah, which is great. Actually, it is
yeah.
much easier when, a couple is together, no matter what sex they are. Like when you have somebody to do this kind of big shift in your life with is always easier to
Well,
stick
I
with.
mean, that's a big part of this. When we talk about following the carnivore diet, it's like your whole family dynamic changes when you change like how food is prepared and what you're eating, because everybody else then has to, people either stake their claim in the ground and say, I'm going to live and die by Oreos, or they say, Mom, I want you to be healthy. So we'll do whatever you're doing. And, and everything in between. So it is like a lot of that stuff has to be negotiated in the beginning, and people need help, kind of figuring out how to do that and getting the support to do that. So,
right.
Yeah,
that's always, I think, the biggest.
So I don't think
hurdle.
men ever think about or talk about that kind of stuff. But it's like, they just like, I'm waiting for my food to come, or
like,
I'm making my own food and this is how it is going to be.
Right. But, they're like, steak,
yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. But, we have to think about all the other details.
Right. So in terms of the women that you work with, what are some of the biggest issues you see, for Black women in terms of their health?
It, is really diabetes or pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, concern about cancer, family members having cancer, and of course the weight. So that's really
the weight is often the tipping point for anyone, right? To get motivated, I think a lot of times.
Well, I'm actually dealing with older women. So, in the 40 to, to 60 range.
Yeah.
And so I feel like by that point, people are getting out of being just concerned about the aesthetics of it and more a kind of like,
I want to feel good.
I'm really having a hard time keeping up with my kids. My knees hurt, this
the
and
energy
that. And now,
thing is such a big thing. So when you, especially I'd say women, that come to you that are in their 40s going through perimenopause, do you really see carnivore as helpful during that time period?
Absolutely. And I'm surprised by how many people say, well, one, they come out of menopause, which I'm not sure is a good thing or not.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. Because ultimately, the longer that we do have some estrogen, the better our bone health is, the better our brain health is, heart health. So in some ways, not all women are excited to necessarily start their cycle again, but they're like, no.
Well, it definitely sparks some alarm, a lot of going to the doctor, making sure that this isn't a sign that something else is going on. Sure. But I've definitely seen that. Also a significant reduction in like hot flashes and just the general discomforts of of going through menopause. So those are the things that I generally see, and it helps a lot for people.
Do you ever see that
weight loss is
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
Say, weight loss, of course, is, people want that to come quickly. And the older we get, it doesn't come quickly.
It doesn't.
So, some of what, I'm doing is trying to help normalize that, help people to understand that, a pound a week is normal.
And plenty. No if you want it to be long-term, like you don't want to lose 5 pounds, 7 pounds in a week, it's
I always say, if I could help you to do that, I would do that 100%, if it were at all possible. But it's just not. And the older we are, like, it's even, and the more dramatic and crazy the things we do, it makes it that much harder the next time around. And I really want people to put people on the last diet ever. So this is it, you get down to your goal weight, you stay there, there's no problems, and you're not having to like constantly going through these cycles of restriction and binge and all of that. But the only way to do that is to to eat nourishing food, help your body to relax and understand that there is no famine. There's no reason for it to hold on to this stuff. And and that you are properly nourishing it.
Yeah. So I have to ask, do you find that there's ever anybody that carnivore is not good for?
I haven't found that to be the case. I mean, physically, I
Mhm.
think that it is fine for anyone.
Mhm.
It is certainly healthy.
Mhm.
There are people who are more metabolically flexible, so, or they are just, more resilient, so
Mhm.
they can add damaging food without it having like a long-term impact.
Mhm. Mhm.
So those people can eat more of, a standard American diet perhaps and do okay, or at least for
Right.
a while.
Right. Right.
But I think, so physically, I think anybody is fine on it, but
Mhm.
mentally, there are some people who don't want to eat beef or pork. I mean, they don't want to eat beef, or red meats, or I guess what they consider to be heavier meats. They don't eat enough,
Mhm.
which, is a big problem, I think, amongst women.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and and so they're just not getting a lot of nutrients, or they're the kind of person that wants to control the food and control the portions and the macros so much that they get to the point of making unnatural foods so that these numbers
Mhm.
come together perfectly.
Mm.
So, eating a lot of shakes and
Mhm.
adding, liquid oils is not food.
Right. Right. Right.
So, if you want to have the convenience of maybe eating, various kinds of protein bars and shakes and prepackaged foods, that doesn't really work on carnivore. There's
Right.
not, there's not a
Right.
lot of prepackaged
You gotta
food. I
just
mean,
eat real food. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
make jerky.
Yeah.
So for me, like that is,
I've seen some of the like making waffles out of like
mhm.
pig, I
Egg
guess, or
yolks,
egg yolks.
or
Okay.
well, there's lots
Yeah.
of different ways
Different.
that
Yeah.
people do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always got to find a way to get something like that seems like carbs in our diet, right? No matter what. I
Yeah.
mean, for some people, it's what gets them through. There was one other thing that, I am curious about doing, blood tests and checking on your labs, yearly, what have you, as people do. Do you see cholesterol going up for people when they're on a carnivore diet? And is that even an issue?
Yes, it is very common for people's LDL to be pretty high,
Mm-hmm.
their HDL to also be high,
Mm-hmm.
their triglycerides to lower significantly.
Because that's
And
connected to sugar for a lot of people that don't know that. Yeah.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. So that is very common. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I definitely have people who express concern. Their doctors, say,
Sure.
"Oh my
Their
God, your
doctors freak out.
cholesterol." Right,
Yeah.
right. And in fact, I did an interview on my podcast with a carnivore cardiologist who
Mm.
answered all of these questions for me to really understand, the relationship of insulin resistant sugar or and fat to cholesterol and to
Mm-hmm.
heart attacks and ultimately
Mm.
death.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really helpful to hear him lay that out. I mean,
Mm.
one, I didn't know that insulin resistance and diabetes is the cause of heart disease. And he said this like flat out. And he's like, I operate on people, and all the time I start testing people to see, if they're diabetic, and often they're saying, no, I'm not, and they are.
Yeah.
This is what's causing the
Yeah.
heart disease.
Yeah.
It's not the fat, and it's not the cholesterol. The cholesterol is it's there's a lot of variation in cholesterol. There's, the different types and
Yeah.
what they mean. And so if you really want to make a difference on cardiovascular disease, according to him, and others in the field, they say, you got to deal with the insulin resistance. And that is the sugar consumption and the carb consumption. So for the people I work with, I point them to that video, and then we also go to the video, Dave Feldman, who wrote I guess his website is called the Cholesterol Code, I think.
Okay.
And he has done a tremendous amount of research on cholesterol and has collated it all into just a mass of incredible, information.
Mhm.
And on the front page of the website, he has pinned a post that says, I think it's called Start Here. And so it explains like, what is cholesterol? What is your doctor concerned about? But what are the actual risks and all of
Mhm.
that? And, a lot of times what he's been able to show, I mean, looking at the data, that, high cholesterol doesn't walk hand in hand with death from a heart attack.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's what you care about. Like, I
Right.
don't really care about like what a potential signal in my body is doing. I care about,
The
falling down dead
outcome.
on the sidewalk. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't tell people what to do. And certainly even at the doctors, doctors don't, I mean, they tell us what to do and we do or we don't do it.
Right.
So, I give people that information and encourage them to research it and make their own decision about what they want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to throw out the book, The Cholesterol Myth. I don't remember who wrote it, but I read this way back when I was in nutrition school. And it really goes into sort of the history of the studies that they cherry picked in order to say that cholesterol was this, heart disease killer. And there was a lot of studies out at the time that showed that there wasn't a correlation or a connection. But what won out was the idea that it was a killer, and so we've got medication that's going to help lower it. So it's a pretty fascinating book to just go in and understand how we even collectively got to the idea that cholesterol was, the heart disease issue. So yeah, I encourage people just in general, because I talk all the time, and I'm glad that you brought that up about sugar being, much more of the underlying issue when it comes to heart health than anything else. And really, sugar is the underlying issue for the majority of our major diseases.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, though, if I could eat nothing but sugar and have no consequences, but the consequences are steep. Yeah.
So at this point, do you have any cravings for sugar, do you feel like, or is it primarily gone?
So like the physical craving, like, I used to smoke cigarettes, and I think about like the early days of quitting smoking where like, my feet are already starting to walk to the corner store,
Right.
but, my head's like, no, I don't want to smoke, but my body's already moving there. Like those days of that level of craving where it's like, it's a physical, real pain. Those days are gone. But, the emotional imprint of using sugar for emotional management is still there. I mean, and so it's now I'm calling on myself to be the adult and broaden my toolkit and have more means of dealing with my emotional life. So I won't say that I don't have a desire, but the desire is more abstract. It's not like a painful craving.
It's not controlling
remember,
you.
And I was sitting, I had coffee this weekend with some friends, and they ordered a chocolate chip cookie that was like chocolate chips. It was particularly chocolatey and glistening and stuff. And as they were biting into it and breaking it open and stuff, I was looking at it thinking, wow, that's a good looking cookie. And then I thought, I am sort of having a desire, but like not enough that any of my neurons would fire to reach my hand over. Like, it's just, I'm looking at it, but it's not enough to like, it's easy enough to look away and then I'm just kind of done with it.
Right.
So,
and it's amazing to get to that place, right? With any kind of, because I mean, ultimately sugar is an addiction. It has addictive properties just as much as any drug. And it's probably our biggest addiction in America. So I love that you explaining that you're getting to that point where, because I mean, anything that we're addicted to, we're going to have to face again in our lives, and we're going to have to sort of like choose whether or not to partake in it if it's, something that's not good for us. But getting to that point where you're like, I see it can be enjoyable, but I also can choose not to, and it's not painful to do that. Yeah.
And I
think
definitely get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I think is really important for anybody that's listening to really take in, because
And I
I
think
know.
also once you get on carnivore, you start to feel so much better, and
Yeah.
not like a little bit better, but a lot better. And so that first bite of something, there may be some pleasure in there, but 20 minutes later, you're already starting to feel 1,000 times worse. You know,
Right.
the pain, the aches and pains, whatever autoimmune stuff, whatever thing you were working on and healing, all
Yeah.
that comes rushing back.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And
then
you're
it's
like,
kind of
damn
like,
it.
oh, it's like carnivore made me feel a lot better, not
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Right. Right.
So,
And
yeah, but
sometimes it's,
everybody has to go
yeah.
through that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good to have those moments, right? Because then you can
Mhm.
really see how far you've come. Well, this
Yeah.
has just been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing about your process, and then, what you're doing to support, particularly the Black women out there. And I think it is so important, because I do have to say that, like, a lot of what I've seen around carnivore is sort of that bro culture, as I mentioned before, right? And having a feminine approach, of the sort of more like inviting, I think is good, obviously, for a lot of um, you know, people that lean more towards the feminine and sort of need that invitation. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So tell people where they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Make sure to come to my YouTube channel. It's Black Carnivore. And there you will find like tons of interviews with regular people who have adopted a carnivore diet and transformed their health. I think that, many people like appreciate the science, the studies, but sometimes it's more impactful just to hear the straight up testimony of a regular person who's got like your problem and your disease and is fixing it by following a carnivore diet. So you can check out that. And then I have lots of videos to sort of, give you more information about carnivore, how to do it, some food videos, that sort of thing. And then you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Black Carnivore. And, I try to post interesting and inspiring content, so you can find me there. And then I lurk on other social media, but
Lurker.
you'll best find me. Yeah, you'll best find me on Instagram. And then I'm on Facebook. I do have a private Facebook group for Black carnivores, so feel free to come check me out there. And I love
Yeah.
to converse with people.
And then people can apply to work with you through the
Mhm.
blackcarnivore.com/apply now. But yeah, your Instagram's great. I love it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think the hardest part of doing this way of eating is really having the consistency and sustainability when the rest of the world is, forcing sugar in your face.
Right.
So working with my program really gives you that kind of daily accountability. And that's what helps people to really, get their best foot forward and get started on carnivore. So that is definitely one reason why you want to work with me.
Yeah. Sounds great. I love it.
Mhm.
Thanks again for being on here today, sharing all your wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, I will see you next time.